do buyers decide what price they're prepared to pay on a given day, and how do they assess risk when committing to buy grain?
I'd say a good seller is somebody who you can rely on. The price is okay, what you'd strike the deal on, but once you've done the deal, you want to know that the person you're buying from will execute the deal with you. I.e., we put transport through to them, they will load it when we want them to load it, within reason obviously, and that the grain is all good quality and goes into the home without any hassle. That's the perfect deal. It's not always perfect, but that's the perfect deal. And somebody who wants to work with you, we want to work with them, and it's a good deal. That's the ideal. And that the seller is somebody, things go wrong, and that they will be a bit flexible, and we are flexible with them, and then we will execute the business and pay them on time when they should be paid. The price is determined by, futures is the basics of the market, and each home you go to will be trading at a premium to those futures. That's sort of the calculation. But when I was certainly trading, I would know my book. So if I've got homes somewhere in Somerset or homes up to the northwest, and I need to meet for next week, I'm going to make sure that I pay for it to get it bought and from somebody who I can rely on to execute the business. So the price is against where the market is on the day, but also we reflect my book. If usually one would have sales made that you want to buy the grain against to execute it. Obviously, if it's a forward trade, you'd be buying against a forward anticipated market, which case you know which homes you normally sell to. Whether it's a known compounder or known flour miller who you regularly have homes to, that you know roughly where the price would be. And if it's a good seller, you'd make sure that you buy it from him rather than somebody who you couldn't rely on. Quite often we were selling either directly to certainly the flour millers we were selling mostly directly to. Some of the feed compounders were quite often done through brokers, brokers who broke between buyers and sellers in terms of not what you do, but the end users. They work with the end users and then go to the traders to say, look, I've got this certain amount to buy. The end user is usually covering his order book. So he's making, if he's a flour miller and he's just sold flour to a supermarket and it's 1,000 tons worth of flour a month, it might be for 12 months or for 6 months, it can be sometimes 18 months, and he doesn't want to be exposed to that price risk and that lack of cover for any longer than he needs to, because he's a flour miller, he's not a risk taker, he's not a commodity trader. So we will cover it. He will come on to us and say, do you want to do 1,000 tons a month? That for us, it's for 18 months, that's 18,000 tons of grain. That would be too much. But we might say, well, we'll do 10 loads a month, i.e. 290 tons a month, or we might do 500 tons a month. It depends on, the price he gives us is good, but also if it's a home that we always want, so particularly down in the south, where there's so few homes, if it's the right price, we'd always do the whole deal, and we'd find a way how to cover it. And then one of the ways how we'd cover it was we would go to some of our reliable sellers, farmer traders who are forward thinking and say, look, we've just done this business into a particular mill, and they will know who that mill is, because we'll tell them, how about doing, 2 loads a month, or do you want to do 300 tons or whatever to start, so we can start covering that business. We can take some margin, obviously, and they lock in themselves into a good market, into a good home that they like and we like, and that's how the trust further on comes into it. Quite often it's big cover. Sometimes a feed miller might come on and say he wants to buy 1 load a month from say from April through to July, and then he wants to buy 2 loads a month in August and September and October, and then it goes on in funny sort of quantities, and it sort of adds up to say 300 or 400 tons. And then they get others who want to buy a big quantity, which often is the flour miller rather than the feed compounder. But some feed compounders, particularly the poultry people, who may well be locking into egg business with the supermarket or a big retailer, will want to cover that business quite quickly. And again, they want to buy from a trader that they know is going to deliver. They don't want to buy it from a trader who's just somebody who always is the risk taker and then doesn't actually deliver on the day. It's that whole link the whole way through. So we want to have somebody who can load. We want to have some haulier that will take it there, and the end miller will end home will tip it on the, it's good quality grain. Sometimes farmers put too much emotion into a market. Currently, obviously, prices are very close to, if not below, cost of production, and that's hurting, and it's hurting a lot. But I'm just reading one or two things recently where actually the market has just gone completely flat. So each month is now currently gets full, and then it goes to the next month at the same price. So March is nearly full, April goes to the same price, 160x or whatever it is, and then on further and further. So they're actually just losing out cash flow and losing price. Margin. I mean, in the day, everybody has to live on something. We'd all love to have big margins. I guess, in the day, when prices are very high, farmers make more money, we make more money. And when prices are low, like now, and when the market is flat, I'm expecting, I should think, it's extremely difficult for anybody and everybody to make any money out of this current market because everybody's bidding the same price. Some traders will have forward sales that they're still possibly still prepared to pay a little bit extra to get those sales locked in, which will have a good margin, but all those sales will be gradually getting taken out, and hence the market goes flat. So yeah, the perception is there's good margins to be made for everybody. When it's obviously 3 or 4 years ago with the Ukrainian situation, and then the COVID thing was a muddle. Volatility in the market is easier for a trader to make money, and also opportunities for the farmer to make money too. But obviously, we go completely around a circle to now when it's very flat and very, very difficult. Making sure that they load and execute the business and make it possible to get hold of them when we need to. For instance, some people might sell grain in December, which is a really awkward month. So they sell for December, but they actually only want to load the first 10 days of the month. That's not really on, but obviously a discussion has to be had to make sure that people can. We have to supply people, feed mills, etc., all the way through. That's done properly. But sampling is absolutely critical. Farmers have got much better at sampling their own grain, particularly straight off the trailers, making bins, taking some big bulk samples and making them very well mixed so that you know what you're getting, rather than just poking a sample pole into the top of a 10 meter high heap when you're only sampling the first 2 meters, and there could be all sorts of things underneath. So sampling is absolutely critical, and making that information available. Don't get just one merchant to sample it. Try and get 2 or 3 to give them the samples that you've taken, and obviously then making sure that grain is looked after well in store. Like last year it was very, very hot, very dry. So yes, the wheat's come in very good condition, but it needed cooling. And if you were to cool it with damp, miserable air that we've had, of recent times, and it hasn't been all that cold, I guess one could see some bug problems, which is such a shame when it's sat there for such a long time when it didn't need to have an issue. Last season would have been 25 crop would have been a good year, but there's obviously difficult years when it's very wet and very variable quality. That's when the sampling really kicks in. Milling wheat premiums obviously for the current year are terrible because there's so much quality. Never seen it ever before. I've never seen it before. But then you get different years with different Hagbergs, and previous 2 or 3 years, the protein's been very variable, and it's very important to know where the low proteins and the high proteins are to make sure that it goes into the mill within the the claim schedules that are there, rather than getting rejected or massively reduced in price when it didn't need to be. I think working with people, listening to the market. I think having a verbal conversation with traders is always good, and not always just one. A lot of farmers I dealt with often would deal with 2 or 3, which is good to have, because different merchants will have different homes that they have more to themselves than other homes. So yeah, building up a trust with the grain trader. Reading information, as much information you can. There's some quite good podcasts out there, which 1 or 2 grain merchants do. AHTB's got a lot of information. You guys put out quite a lot of information, and have a set pattern that you try and do from most one year to the next. Don't break it. Although, knowing your cost of production is critical, particularly now when you're right down very close to it. So if you see a little blip in the market, I often used to say one or two farmers, I said, look, over Christmas time, the futures always used to go up, and they do every single year. They go up. So actually, don't go to sleep necessarily over Christmas time, because sometimes there's a £10 rise just over 10 days because everybody's gone to sleep and somebody wants some cover. So don't, do listen out there for opportunities. Being aware of, lots of things like, what's going on in the wide world. There's obviously with, a lot of world politics going on at the minute, world weather situations. We are in a very global market now, totally global. I was looking at the import-export figures. We're not exporting any grain at all. We're still importing. And so we are very vulnerable to, currency changes. There's, you get a situation now where everything's rock bottom. The quality could change, or the situation could change weather-wise very quickly. From sort of March onwards, there's Ukraine, Russia is looking quite good at the minute, but there's readings, you can get late frosts that can hammer crops in the eastern European countries quite quickly. You've got all the planting seasons in the US to come ahead with all the maize and all the soys, etc. I believe it's quite dry in South America. So all these sort of things come through, and you can just see a day when there's a bit of a blip, and particularly, if you suddenly get a situation where a flour miller or compounder comes in, suddenly they all need to buy quite a lot in a short period of time, and the market can move quite quickly. So be ready to take that, particularly if there's a price that you want to achieve, worth letting your merchant know, where you want to be, just so that there's an opportunity to miss out. So it's working with people, and I guess people put us, on your platform, which you'll pick days when somebody suddenly needs to buy it, and they can achieve a premium for it. I think bringing emotion into it sometimes, I can't possibly expect that market, but in the day, if the fundamentals of the market as they are currently at the moment, if you want 160 or whatever it is, the local market, you can take that price today, or you can take that price in May. It could even be worse if there's a clear out. And certainly I'm in the south of England, but the wheat crops look absolutely magnificent this year. Absolutely magnificent. I've never seen them look so good. And if they come to a fruition of a really big harvest, nobody's going to want to have old crop left at the end of this current market, and people are going to be looking to start to market the 26 crop, which I don't know for much myself because I'm not involved, but I suspect people haven't sold very much forward for 26, and that's going to be quite a problem. It could be a year where actually exports start to come in, but if exports come in, the market will have to be an awful lot lower than it is today, and that will hurt. So emotion, I think, is something you should take out and have a plan, and work with a merchant or merchants to sort of make sure you have a certain amount sold forward. Used to usually be generally sort of 50% by harvest, or around about 50%, or of a sort of an estimated yield, not probably an overestimated yield. I mean, some years if it was £200 plus, you might sell 60-70% of it, but if it's low as it is now, you might only have 25% sold. Well, at least you have something as something, a plan to work off. On an empty sheet of paper, you're just sort of staring, thinking, when do I hit it? So you need to have some. I guess at the moment the new crop is a premium to the old crop, and I would say there's probably an opportunity for people to lock in a bit. It's probably quite hard for them to sell them, because I imagine that the trade isn't buying an awful lot forward because they're not able to sell much forward. The feed combine is looking at a rise in the market, and he's looking at all this gold crop and looking at the state of the crop. So I guess selling forward today would be probably quite a good thing. And the biggest change, certainly when I started in the mid 80s, intervention was very much the part of the market which you probably never even heard of, but it was a EU driven thing, and basically everybody was growing grain to put into intervention because it was the best market of the lot. It's a crazy situation. We had, there's a store up here the road here which is storing 100,000 tons of grain. It was grain everywhere, so that was all dispersed. We've obviously now left the EU. So that's one of the biggest changes. There's no protection at all for the market, and it's now so totally globally driven, as we can see how easy it is for grain to be imported. In fact, exporting from the UK now is actually extremely difficult. A lot more difficult than it used to be, because facilities aren't really available as much as they used to be, and quite a lot of them are quite old. So importing is almost easier than exporting. So, and the other thing also, particularly where we are in the south, the number of homes you can sell to has drastically reduced. I mean, we used to, in Hampshire, used to have ranks. Southampton was the biggest flour mill in the country. That disappeared 10 years ago. Only beginning of this year, no, last year, sorry, one of the compounders in Hampshire disappeared. So I think there's no compounders in Hampshire, and all that usage was taken over to Wales. So in the south of England, there's very few homes, and actually as you go further east, it gets worse and worse. So you see now grain having to be transported a long, long way, which is fine when the quality is good, but you get a poor quality year, that's when it gets really, really desperate. Malting barley, my colleague is involved with that, is suddenly the demand has absolutely collapsed recently. Whether that's going to change going forward or not is quite difficult to see. In terms of wheat demand, the bioethanol plants are obviously up in the air. They're currently both shut at the minute because obviously there's no known what the policy is, or whether we're going to import all the ethanol from America. So I'm guessing if we can keep producing good quality grain, it may be that we'll have to start exporting grain in the near future, but we'd have to be quite a lot lower in price. So going forward, it looks a bit tricky. But that can change. It can change. But I think generally consumption in the UK seems to be declining. And the lack of homes, particularly for us in the south, if you're up in the Midlands or up in some parts of the eastern counties or up in the northwest, there's plenty of homes up there. And down in the southwest, there's plenty of homes, particularly that's feed mills. There's a big flour mill, obviously, at Avonmouth. Things are having to travel a long way, which is expensive. That haulage is taking away, when you could haul somewhere for £6 a tonne versus 17, 18, that 17, 18 versus 6 or 7 or 8 has to pay for, and sadly it's off the bottom line of the grain price. And it makes it slower to move as well. So that's probably one of the biggest changes, I think, is lack of homes. The homes have got bigger, and I think some of the homes, particularly in the flour industry, have got better in terms of taking grain. There's one or two older plants which are quite tricky. But as a trader, then you've got to make sure you're in with those buyers, because there's not many of them, and you want to make sure that when they're in on the day to buy, we sell to them, and then obviously we can push it forward to the farm, on the farm side. The farms have obviously got bigger. All the changes, all the SFIs gave them an opportunity to sort of take land out of production, but obviously now that's all up in the air as well. So it is a really difficult time, and farmers, arable farmers who had all the help with all the, the single farm payments have now pretty well disappeared, and then the dairy prices have dropped. So it's a tricky time, but it will come back. But quite how it comes back, it always comes back in a different sort of way, and sometimes very unexpected how it happens. I'm not sure grain sellers increasingly favour end users. I think we need the end users because they're big and important. But as long as we wouldn't sell to an end user with a spec that's impossible to deliver to, because that's crazy. Certainly, I would say some of the domestic maltsters are making life pretty tricky with ergot and bugs. So that is very difficult for the farm side. In terms of, I was more involved with the wheat, obviously the quality end. We generally work with the flour miller who gave fullbacks on protein particularly, and in slightly difficult years the Hagberg, but not a lot. So again, the quality, the sampling quality is absolutely critical to know what you've got. And if it's just not going to make the spec, it doesn't want to sit on a lorry going 150 miles and getting rejected, because that's the worst scenario. Farm assurance schemes, I remember when they first came in, there was huge resistance from farmers, but my goodness, it has changed the quality of grain storage massively. There were some dreadful farm storage, farm storages, and with bugs and wet and access, and they're storing grain that was going to the food chain, so it was absolutely critical. They came in, and there was a lot of resistance. This is 20, 30, 40 years ago, but that's now for the good, and I think on the whole, farm storage is very good. Farm storage schemes, I think some of the people running it sometimes are a bit questionable, but the actual principle of them is very important. And the grain merchants and the hauliers and everybody, we all have to go through the farm assurance schemes, and they are part of the process. But I don't, one or two buyers will try and set their own terms, but we would have to make sure that's passed on, known to the farmer what those situations are, particularly if there's some sort of ambiguity to it. But on the whole, there isn't ambiguity. There's, the trader will be honest with the seller. If he's going to try and load wheat that's only 11.8 and it's got to be a minimum of 12, well, it's not going to go in, or it's going to get a massive hit. Well, in fact, the current situation, he wouldn't even deliver 12% wheat because the discount would be greater than delivering his feed. So that's only where it is today. But that's not normal. That probably won't happen another year. We have the 26 crop, and it'd be pouring a rain, and then they wish they all had kept 25 crop in the barn. But that's just amazing quality year last year, but there obviously wasn't a lot of it. Will they be open to quality spec? Yes, obviously but even like milling wheat, if the premium was only £15, no, it wouldn't. If the milling wheat premium went up to like £60 a tonne or something, they probably would be importing more wheat to replace it. If they could use some of it, there was a year, 2014 was the most diabolical year. 2012, sorry. And it rained from May all the way through to the following May, and the grain that was produced was just dreadful. It was just, a lot of the wheat wasn't even over 68, 67 kilo weight. It was rubbish. And they imported stuff, and they had to blend in some of the stuff we had. So yeah, the compounder had to try and use it. There was massive discounts against it. Some wasn't usable, some was usable, but yeah, that was probably the extreme year. When yes, price will talk to a degree, but they still have to produce particularly it's flour to the spec the flour miller wants, and if he doesn't like it, he'll just say, right, I want all German, I want all Canadian or whatever to replace the English. Hence why the flour miller will always keep a certain amount of German or say Canadian, particularly German or Canadian wheat in the grist, in the mix of the flour, so that he needs to introduce it again the next year, that he can get it in there quite quickly. Whereas if he's all English, in fact, this was the downfall one of the mills we had in the south coast, that they went to all English, and the next year they couldn't get all English, and they had to change all their labelling, everything, and it cost them an absolute fortune. So every year is different, and that there are extremes of years.